Okay, so moving on from how the interviewer can affect the person being interviewed to how wording can affect how the person responds. So, what an interview says or how they word their questions can affect the response that they get back. For example, do you think the detrimental um, I gotta think of the right word. Effects, that's it, that the war has on children should cause us to do yada yada yada. But and the minute that I put the word detrimental in there, that already makes you know that I think it's detrimental instead of do you think the effects of war cause children to yada yada yada. And then what potentially some of you found out while you were doing your own surveys is how questions are worded. For example, what's the average number of times you eat butter per week? So now sometimes that brings to mind people go, well, do you mean actual butter? Can I count? I can't believe it's not butter. When you say average number of times, like you mean how much I eat per day and then I add that all up. So the question's very confusing, and I'm sure you've probably taken some surveys where you were a little confused. As a matter of fact, you might have gotten confused on the survey that you filled out in class that one day for the 5th grade student. A second example, when did you move to Rancho Cucamonga? Well, these would all be appropriate responses. When I was 9, 1972, 5 years ago. All of those have very different contexts. So difficult to answer that question or to get results that I can then do some math with necessarily if I don't ask the question in a particular way to warrant those particular answers that I want. Maybe the real question I want to know is how many years have you lived in Rancho? And last but not least, unintentional bias is when the surveyor deliberately tries to pick the sample, like I had you do with the random rectangle activity, just to show that there's going to be bias. You're going to have a tendency towards one or another type of rectangle or person or response or whatever that might be. So that's why I want to use my different types of sampling methods, especially simple random sample, in order to make sure that I'm not unintentionally biasing my sample. Okay, so why do we want to do inference? Well, we want to take the results from our experiments and be able to apply them to the population. So if we properly choose our sample, we'll avoid bias. And we have to remember that every sample is going to be different. They will vary from each other. So therefore, we're going to have to use a little bit of math, in other words, a probability model, to look at in order to figure out the likelihood of our results happening. And we will calculate margin of error to see how much off we might be in our prediction model. And we also must remember that if we have more sample data, obviously we get better results than small sample data. And all of these topics we're going to talk about again in chapters 10, 11, 12, and 13. Okay, that's it for this set of notes. See you tomorrow in class.